Hello, everyone. Thank you and welcome back. I have the pleasure now of introducing you to Kelly Butler. The Right to Read Inquiry Report addresses teacher training. It recommends that not only should school boards provide extensive teacher training in the science of reading, but that teacher education programs also. So they must address the importance of word reading accuracy and efficiency for reading comprehension, how accurate and efficient word reading develops, how to teach foundational word reading and spelling skills in the classroom, and the importance of teaching foundational word reading skills to promote equality for all students. This is recommendation number 48. The OHRC further recommends that teacher education programs better equip teachers who are qualified to teach kindergarten to grade 6 to deliver the critical components of word reading instruction and identify, instruct, and support students with word reading difficulties. Those are recommendations 49 and 55. So 49 to 55. Kelly Butler, Chief Executive Officer of the Barksdale Reading Institute. Barksdale Reading Institute will address teacher training. The Institute's literacy work encompasses early childhood and parenting for school readiness, professional developments for pre-kindergarten to grade 3 teachers and literacy coaches, improving teacher preparation for early literacy instruction, and developing literacy leaders. Kelly spearheaded BRI's development of the Reading Universe, a detailed scope and sequence for training teachers on how to deliver sequential, systematic, explicit reading instruction, which is at readinguniverse.org. She also is the author of 2 statewide studies and developed a subsequent statewide initiative to improve teacher preparation programs focused on early literacy instruction in Mississippi's 15 public and private universities. A former high school teacher in the Greenwich, Connecticut public schools, Ms. Butler holds a bachelor's degree in special education from the University of Alabama and a master's from Harvard University. Kelly has levered the Institute's successful track record to initiate several multi-organization and multi-state initiatives, including the Big Dipper's short course for the science of reading, addressed for science of reading teachers, a path forward, bringing the success of reading to teacher preparation and licensure. And she is a 20-member national reading member, and a 20-member national reading of, and a 20-member team of reading experts to review the teacher preparation programs in a neighboring state. Oh, your resume is so great, Ms. Butler. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's really good to be here with all of you folks in Ontario. And I hope that maybe I can catch up on your schedule a little bit. I don't think my slides are going to take very long, but thank you for inviting me, and particularly to Alicia for inviting me to participate. I'm going to share my screen now, and we'll save some time at the end to ask some questions. So let me do that quickly. Well, this is going to let me do it. Here we go. How's that?
It's very good. Very good.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Well, I am Kelly Butler. I'm the CEO of the Barksdale Reading Institute. I'm coming to you today from Jackson, Mississippi, which is the poorest state in this country and where we've been doing a lot of hard work to lift ourselves off the bottom. I want to acknowledge at the outset, though, the really good work you all do with IDA internationally, but particularly in North America, where you have led the charge for the science of reading and really put it at the forefront of everybody's work. So you have tilled a lot of ground and you're now bearing some really good fruit. So you continue to inspire us. Thank you. Thank you for the really hard work you've done. I also want to say thank you for putting me ahead of Kareem on this sequence today. He's a hard act to follow, and I'm really thrilled that he's going to be here. I'm be interested to see what my friend Kareem has to say too. So, all right, let's begin then. I've been asked to speak to some very specific things today. One is to tell you the story of the Reading Institute and our work in Mississippi, why we have focused on teacher training, how we have worked with systems and districts to change policy and practices that have a broader effect than classroom by classroom, We'll touch a little bit on the importance of administrators and the work that we've done around there, and I'll share some resources with you at the end that we think are helpful and have guided a good bit of our work. So I want to begin, for those of you who are not familiar with the Barksdale Reading Institute, we were established in 2000 with a $100 million investment by Jim Barksdale, a native Mississippian. Jim is the former CEO of Netscape and an AT&T wireless executive, but along the way, he was also a senior officer and innovator at FedEx. Jim is a believer in possibilities, but he's also pragmatic. And he described his idea about forming the Institute based on his efforts at FedEx to revolutionize and systematize a process that achieved global scale. He challenged us with this. If FedEx can move a package from the middle of Manhattan to the middle of Tokyo, track it along the way, and guarantee its timely arrival within 48 hours, we ought to be able to teach every child in Mississippi to read. So if you've ever received a FedEx package and you've signed that little gizmo, that handheld gizmo that tracks reliable delivery, you've been touched by Jim Barksdale's pragmatism and ingenuity. It's that same pragmatism that we've tried to apply at the Reading Institute. And when we figured out what worked, we did it everywhere. Jim wanted his truck drivers at FedEx to do the thing that worked consistently. And he believed that if we approached reading with the same consistency, it would make a difference. That, my friends, is how you lift a state off the bottom. So here's what's worked. The Barksdale team designed and tested a literacy block model before there was reading first, before there was letters, and before there was much awareness about the National Reading Panel. We hit the ground running the same year the panel's report was published, and we set about embedding the science of reading into every level of Mississippi's education system. Of course, we did this with important partners along the way, but the nimbleness of the Institute allowed us to be a force for change in an arena that is slow to change and risk-averse, namely schools. So our reading gizmo, if you will, was to create consistency through an evidence-based literacy block model. The model has 4 essential elements: mastery-based, high-quality materials with a logical scope and sequence, professional development in the science of reading in weekly digestible bites for teachers that they could try in their classrooms, followed by instructional coaching, modeling, and feedback to teachers, and finally, meaningful interventions that targeted the lowest deficit skill. During the first decade, we provided training and resources to teachers and school leaders in over 180 of Mississippi's lowest performing schools. And when the Literacy-Based Promotion Act passed, which is our 3rd grade law, Mississippi was poised to take the model to scale in short order. Our success is that we did what worked and we did it everywhere. It was that blanketing effect that catapulted us to the national average as on the nation's report card. So let me pause here and put some of this in chronology for you that sort of weaves together the story of policy and the things that Barksdale was doing over these past couple of decades that led to this victory of NAEP. As I said earlier, the Reading Institute was established the same year of the National Reading Panel report. We engaged in 2 key strategies: working with teachers in schools and working with faculty in teacher preparation programs. We completed an early study of the 8 public programs that led to a change in licensure requirements in 2005 by prescribing 2 3-hour early literacy courses that all programs, public and private, must provide. We'll return to this in a bit. This little blip around 2010 is during the time when the state began to roll out training for Common Core. But this also contributed significantly in the long run to our NAEP scores by bringing into alignment the state test with the national standards. In 2013, the Literacy-Based Promotion Act was enacted. This is the multifaceted law that took the Barksdale model to scale. You can see by 2015, as statewide PD and coaching took hold of the adults, children's reading took off. At this juncture, Barksdale conducted its second study to ask the question, if we are now spending $15 million a year to retrain teachers in our schools, what the heck is happening in pre-service? So we conducted a second study, which led to a governor's task force and the development of a professional growth model for pre-service faculty, known as the Mississippi Momentum Partnership. Its purpose has been to create a safe space for teacher prep faculty to receive training and coaching in the science of reading. And as a result of all of these efforts, in 2019, Mississippi was the only state to show growth in fourth grade reading on NAEP. The rest of the states remained flat or in some cases regressed. Of particular significance, Mississippi ranks 7th in improvement of kids kids of color, and 2nd in growth for kids in poverty. These events precipitated phone calls from across the country, and Barksdale established a multi-state initiative to bring the science of reading into teacher prep and take this work beyond the state. So when Alicia posed the question, why teacher training, it reminded me that I needed to emphasize what I've come to believe about systems change. But the reading crisis our countries are facing has very little to do with children and everything to do with the adults that teach them. Our third grade law did not focus on holding 9-year-olds back, but it required adults to do something different. And when they made those changes, kids began to read. So why not prepare the adults from the beginning? Why is it that so many teachers didn't know how to teach reading? Certainly the recommendations from Ontario's Human Rights Commission include substantial professional development to teachers already in the classroom. But buried deep in Section 8, the report finally turns to a critical issue, pre-service teacher preparation. Like your commission, Barksdale has examined teacher preparation programs extensively. After all, we shouldn't fix what's not broken, but we will not know unless we look under the hood. Ours were very deep dives that looked beyond and behind syllabi to examine what was happening on the ground in pre-service courses. We reviewed textbooks, we observed classes, we interviewed faculty, candidates, recent graduates, and school district partners. We did not rank programs or expose the flaws publicly, but like the commission, we came to similar conclusions about why teachers are so poorly trained. First, many schools of education have a deep and long-standing allegiance to philosophy over hard science. But as science marches on, especially cognitive science that tells us how the brain processes language for reading, as this science marches on, schools of ed ignore or resist it, or doing a great service to their candidates, to the profession, and most important, to the children those candidates will teach. We know way too much about how the brain learns, and this knowledge is more important to skilled practitioners than any philosophies about reading. Science may not be accepted in some circles around the world, but it is, after all, how we learn that, indeed, the world is not flat. And knowing that has surely made a difference. Second, the firewall of academic freedom has been used to rationalize that instructors cannot and should not be told what to teach. And yet Lamisa Moats sets the claim of academic freedom on its head when she explains that professional preparation programs have a responsibility to teach a defined body of knowledge, skills, and abilities that are based on the best research in their field. This is no less important in reading than it is in medicine or law. And third, the biggest finding from our study is that few are willing to talk about it, but states are beginning to wrestle with it, and that is that too many faculty themselves don't know the science of reading because their own advanced degrees did not include it. Faculty knowledge is the bottom of this profession's food chain. In a real food chain, these are called primary producers. Everything else relies on the primary producer. And yet without faculty knowledge, the right pre-service curriculum cannot be actualized, even if it is mandated. A good curriculum begets meaningful licensure. Meaningful licensure signals a qualified teacher, and a qualified teacher produces K-3 reading achievement. So Mississippi's response was to develop a professional growth model. Just as K-12 teachers are getting professional development and coaching, Barksdale is providing the same service to Mississippi's pre-service faculty. Now in its 5th year, the Mississippi Momentum Partnership is introducing the science of reading to our primary producers. By the end of next year, we will have trained approximately, and almost all of them, approximately 65 of our early childhood, elementary, and special education faculty in all public and private institutions, at least the willing ones. This model also has 4 essential components. The first, we used high-quality professional development in the science of reading. We have used a community of practice that also examines pedagogy. It is not just what to teach, but how. We are modeling and co-teaching and co-coaching on site in pre-service classrooms. Pictured here is my colleague, Antonio Fierro, who has done a really masterful job of bringing these colleagues along. And finally, we are organizing pre-service curriculum around the conceptual models found in the science. If you walk into a classroom, a pre-service classroom in Mississippi today, you will find large posters of these conceptual models that we are attempting to organize the curriculum around. This work spawned interest around the country and led to a multi-state initiative we call the Path Forward. Working in partnership with the Belt Foundation and the Hunt Institute, both based in North Carolina, which was the first state to express interest. Our first cohort consists of these 6 states you see here. And we have 12 more states in the queue to compete for the next slots in cohort 2. As for in-service teacher support, Barksdale continues to partner with the Mississippi Department of Education to design solutions and make teacher and school leader training and support as seamless as possible. It should begin in pre-service, of course, but when it does not, and even when it does, here's what else is happening. Mississippi guarantees letters training statewide in the basic science for all K-3 teachers, and more recently, the state has extended this for 4th through 12th grade teachers as well. We provide to teachers additional PD and foundational skills in writing, and we are piloting some special support for middle grade teachers to sustain growth in literacy. This will all be rolled out statewide. Through Promotion Act funding, the lowest performing schools continue to receive weekly support from highly trained literacy coaches, and more districts have similarly trained school-based coaches. Last year, we revamped our licensure pathways to embed more meaningful professional growth and move beyond random continuing education credits. As part of improving this progression, we are in the beginning stages of developing better training and compensation for mentors. And this year, we are revisiting the licensure requirements for early literacy to craft a competency-based sequence spanning 12 hours and include a Just Add Water design for those 6 hours we enacted back in 2005. Mississippi teachers are also getting support from MDE for engaging parents with home reading plans, and our teachers can count on reliable screeners at every level of the system. When the pandemic hit, Barksdale secured the national talent needed to assist MDE in designing a comprehensive plan for closing the digital divide. This plan ultimately garnered the $200 million from the legislature to roll out Mississippi Connects. Barksdale staff played a direct role in guiding the design of this plan and for ramping up teachers' gain to employ instructional technology specific to literacy. Also, with a boost from pandemic dollars, schools are receiving budget guidance that enables them to hire critical support personnel, including speech and language, dyslexia therapists, social and emotional supports, and valuable paraprofessionals. And just this week, Mississippi passed the largest teacher pay raise in our history, bringing us a giant step closer to regional and national average. We know that teachers don't have to work second and third jobs to make ends meet, They are better teachers if they don't have to do this of reading and of everything else. One more word about coaching. When people ask me what made the biggest difference here, it is this. I cannot overstate the importance of coaching. Professional development, by definition, should include coaching. It's the bridge from the what to the how, and it increases application from a paltry 10% to a whopping 90%. Coaching is to in-service what modeling should be in pre-service. Teachers new and veteran tell us, just show me how. School leaders typically get the least amount of training in literacy among educators, but as you all know, they're critical to affecting change. If trained well, you can accelerate impact by improving schools and lifting them all at a time, the whole thing at a time, not just one teacher at a time. We have focused quite a bit on literacy development in Mississippi and have been asked by the state to create a micro-credential as part of our principal's licensure renewal. Barksdale's current Literacy for Leaders modules will serve as the basis for this new service. Again, this module has 4 components. It will build familiarity with key aspects of the science and a structured literacy approach. It will show principals scheduling and resource management models to preserve the sanctity of the literacy block, make coaching the norm, and ensure effective delivery of tiers 1, 2, and 3. It will teach them about evidence-based materials and the importance of a logical scope and sequence and what this looks like. And it will walk them through practical approaches to data that doesn't just bring principals into meaningful conversations about student-level data, but helps them lead these conversations. So I've thrown a lot at you, but before I close, I want to underscore the importance of partners and their resources. Remember Jim's advice about figuring out what works and then do it everywhere. There's actually quite a lot of support out there. In addition to a new wave of much improved ELA curricula, there are particular resources for improving instruction that provide clear guidance. Much of what has driven reading instruction for the past 50 years in my country, and probably yours too, is the marketing arm of the publishing industry. But today, with better evidence and evidence-based resources coming on the market, teachers are becoming better consumers, equipped to determine what is truly effective from those that just have a sticker on the front claiming a research basis. As Marilyn Adams once advised, I don't tell teachers to stop doing the bad stuff. I just tell them to start doing the good stuff. Here's some good stuff. These are all practical guides tailored to instruction. These are great options. All of these emphasize a structured approach, and we have used them in all of our Barksdale work in the schools across the state. And coming next year, the Reading Universe. If you have Googled our website, you will see a very rudimentary version of what is to come. This is based on the curriculum that we developed way back in the beginning when we were working shoulder to shoulder in schools. It initially comprised 38 lessons to fit into a nice 38 weeks of academic school year. It will now go online at the end of next year. We are working in partnership with Reading Rockets, the folks at WETA PBS, and First Book. WETA has done a lot of work with Barksdale over the years. First Book, if you're not familiar with it, is a social equity enterprise that serves more than 500,000 teachers in Title I schools. Our Reading Universe will be the most authoritative and resource-rich service about reading instruction available to pre-K 6th grade teachers, and it will be free. As for professional development options, while Letters remains a favorite in many states, including ours, it's no longer the only kid on the block, which is good news. In-person conferences like Plain Talk, Big Sky, and the Reading League are making a comeback, and there's a lot of self-paced PD available online and in hybrid formats. Some are pricey, some are not, some are free. Apologies for the yard crew in the background, thank you for your attention and for your interest in Mississippi's story. I'm happy to entertain your questions. Over to you, Alicia.
Thank you so much for that, Kelly. It's so inspiring to see how much progress you've made in Mississippi. And I know that particularly interesting to us as well are, of course, the work that you've been doing with the university faculties of education and supporting them and bringing them along. I wonder if you could provide us any specific advice in how we can get started doing something like that here in Ontario, and what sort of things that we should look out for in terms of those conversations that we're having.
I'm going to move a minute so I'm not next to this lawnmower. Well, the first thing, as I've said earlier, I think we need to know what's going on in teacher prep before we start tinkering with teacher prep. And I think that's in deference to respecting the faculty that's there. And so I think where we got some traction is in doing this landscape analysis that was both deep, but also very confidential. We didn't expose any programs. We worked very closely with them, with their deans. And we set about trying to really examine what was happening there and then give them some very specific actionable items. When we did it all across the state and all at one time, we realized there were some real common themes. And so I recommend doing it in that fashion, not just one by one, because if you take too much time doing it, by the time you get to the last one, you got to go back and do the first one again. And what emerged for us were some real common themes across the institutions. One being that really the faculty across the board in the big flagships, as well as the small private institutions, were really lacking knowledge in the science of reading. We found that balanced literacy was alive and well. We found very little modeling. And so those were things that we could tackle statewide. When we realized that the coursework was also all over the map, that's what led to our recommendation for those 6 hours that minimally would introduce candidates to the 5 components of reading. So we're big on blanketing things around here. And while in America, local control is a big thing, if you're going to lift a state off the bottom, you're going to have to do it much more broad fashion. So I'd recommend doing all of them at once if you can, simultaneously. And I would recommend not hanging anybody out to dry, but to work with them to try to construct change. This work we're right now doing in a neighboring state, we've really produced, I think, what is going to be a national model for how to do these, and we'll be happy to share those protocols and data portals with you if you get to that point. That'll help kind of accelerate the process.
Thank you. I think that's such a great point, that it's not about hanging anybody out to dry. It's about coming up with ways to bring them along, right? That's what we really need to do here. I was wondering as well, you told us a little bit about the Reading Universe, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the redeveloped Reading Universe site. That's very exciting. But you were also very much involved with the Big Dippers project, and I was wondering if you could just explain to everybody what that is and who it's intended for.
Great. Thanks for asking that. The Big Dippers grew out of work that we had done for Teach for America. And when the pandemic hit, Teach for America, which is a group I've been trying to penetrate for a long time. I have a daughter who was a core member, and I watched with agony over and over every year, every summer institute, how they train them in the DRA and put them into level books. And I kept saying, if we could just teach the Teach for America folks how to teach reading, we'd have a big advocacy group across the country. So they came knocking and asked if Barksdale would create a short course that could be done in 4 weeks' time during their first online, because we were all moving to online at that point, course as an introduction to the science of reading. And it was really geared for people who had never been in a classroom. So they were Teach for America core members. But after we finished that, the group that I had assembled, which we call the Four Dippers, because when you map us on the states, it looks like the constellation of the Four Dippers. And so it kind of caught on early, and since then we've been using that name. But we're coast to coast, from California to New York and several places in between. I put together a group of 4 other organizations to work to build a short course. So it's designed as an on-ramp for the science of reading. If you've heard about the science of reading, but are too afraid to ask anybody that you don't really know what they're talking about, this course is for you. It is 5 modules. It takes about 90 minutes a module. There are checks for understanding along the way. It's very fundamental. It introduces you to the conceptual models, and it touches on all 5 components of reading and assessment. It's very inexpensive. You can get to it, and I can send you a link if you can find us at bigtippers.org. Right now, it is nested at the Hill Center in North Carolina, Beth Anderson is one of our key dippers who joined forces with us to create the TFA course. And she now, it's actually housed there, and she is working the phone lines to keep it going. We are looking to update it a little bit this summer. So we may have a little bit of a hiatus where it's not available, but it'll be back soon. And we also built some facilitation guides so you can use it in a PLC setting as well.
Thank you for that. And I see in the chat several people have mentioned that they have taken that course and really did enjoy it. And those facilitation guides, I've had a look at those. Those are fantastic. And I love that you have one in there that is specifically for administrators. So there's different facilitator guides for this course for different groups, which I think is so important. And maybe one last question, and then we will say thank you for joining. But I think my last question is going to be around that administrator piece. Speaking about the necessity, we've talked about training the teachers, obviously, and we've talked about training the people who train the teachers, but then there's that middle layer in between the administrators. And I wonder if you could just give us your thoughts on the importance of making sure that those administrators and the decision makers, the district level decision makers and the provincial level decision makers have that knowledge as well.
Yeah. Well, those folks at that level are making a lot of decisions about literacy, whether they know it or not. And so it's in our interest to make sure they know what to do when they pick curriculum, for example. Our work with leaders came about sort of along the way as we began to work across schools across the state. My former colleague and predecessor, and I would get on the phone every afternoon. We'd be driving across the state, having visited schools. And over time, every conversation we had ended with, what are we going to do about school leadership? And so for a certain chapter of time, we took about 5 years out of that first 2 decades and carved out a Lit for Leaders model where we actually took over 4 schools. This was actually before Mississippi had a charter law. I called it stealth charter. And we selected and hired and funded the principal's salary in 4 schools. We hired and placed literacy coaches. We converted some of our coaches who had been working in the state into these schools, and really took over the whole thing. And from there, we really vetted the literacy block. We really vetted the Read Well material that we had been using, and it set us on a path recognizing that we needed to do more around school leaders and keep them at least half a step ahead of their staff in terms of getting the training that they needed. So we've developed a quick module for them, which we did in person. We've now moving it to hybrid. And as you heard, we're moving it into a micro-credential. But our goal was to build concentric circles of good leaders. So we moved out of, when we were finished the model of working with individual schools, we put together a kind of a grant program where we invited principals to join a cohort, and working with our staff would meet with them over time and really give them some deep training and give them each other. So they now had other colleagues as building principals who understood these challenges and understood what to do. So we recommend that short course for a principal who's just coming to this or who comes from a totally different background. It's a great introduction to give them a good start.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you, Kelly, so much for joining us today and for sharing everything that you're doing at Barksdale. It's very exciting. And I also want to say, I noticed something in the chat. Everyone is admiring that painting that's behind you there. I'm wondering if you put that up there just because, kids playing hockey, just because you're speaking to Canada today.
My husband will be so pleased. I'm sitting down here in Mississippi, married to a New Yorker, and he has a wall of art that belongs to him. It has all of the sports that he loves: hockey, rugby, sailing. That's the hockey one. He's not in that particular photograph, but that's where it comes from. So thank you. I'll tell him that you all asked.
Well, thank you very much, Kelly, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. And I look forward to you, Corinne.
Thank you.